Welcome to Capitol Events. I'm Randy Davis. It's time to switch sides at the Capitol, and it's time to buckle up for safety. In today's session news, it's crossover day, the last day for each house to act on its own legislation, except for the budget bill, which both chambers will take up on Thursday. Lawmakers spent today in extended floor sessions, finishing up work on a number of controversial bills. The House today scratched Governor Gilmore's plans to allow localities to spend state lottery revenues without strings attached. Delegates also upped the yearly amount to be returned from $123 to $310 million. Republicans complaining the bill is really a backdoor attempt to derail Gilmore's eventual elimination of the car tax. The Senate today refused to add party designations beside candidates' names on state ballots. The vote was 25 to 15 against the change, which would not have applied to local elections. And on a 22 to 16 vote, the state Senate has backed a measure to stiffen Virginia's seatbelt law, but it still faces a few bumps in the road to the governor's desk. Barbara Berlin has more on the latest debate.
Buckle up. It's already a law in Virginia for front seat vehicle passengers, but only enforceable by police when another traffic violation is evident. Senator Ken Stolley's bill is designed to tighten the rules. He believes fears that this could increase the chance of police harassment are unfounded.
In Virginia right now, we give the police officers the authority to stop somebody for not having a city sticker or not putting on their blinker. And I think that in light of that, and in light of the history in North Carolina, for 14 years they've had a primary offense seatbelt rule. There has not been one reported offense in North Carolina of abuse of this particular statute. That doesn't mean there hasn't been abuse in North Carolina. But I don't think this statute is going to create another opportunity or more opportunity for this type of abuse to happen.
While concerned about potential abuse, Richmond Senator Henry Marsh says he reluctantly supports the measure as there's too many lives at stake.
I am concerned about the number of lives that will be lost each year if we don't encourage, coerce, and get people to wear seatbelts. Children learn from their parents, and we would be adding to a generation of persons who would not be trained to wear seatbelts, and seatbelts do save lives.
Some say, however, at a different cost.
Is the money that is coming from your pocket and my pocket over and over, tragically, I would add, to take care of the people not killed in these accidents, but in fact spinal cord injured and brain injured, many of whom languish in our nursing homes throughout Virginia. Hundreds of thousands of dollars from your pockets and my pocket are taking care of these people for one reason. And the reason is that they felt it was no one's business whether or not they buckled up before they drove off on the roads of the Commonwealth.
Despite hours of debate, the seatbelt bill survived and will next be considered by the House, where it will likely face a bumpier road. I'm Barbara Berlin for Capitol Events.
Thank you, Barbara, and it's our pleasure to have with us in the studio this evening the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Jim Gilmore. Thank you for taking time out to be with us.
Thanks, Randy. Appreciate the chance to be here.
You asked me before we were on the air what I thought of the session. It's more important what you think of the session so far. We're halfway through. How would you grade what they're doing with the legislation?
Well, it's halfway through, and generally speaking, I'm happy. They're certainly addressing the issues that we have laid on the table. Taking the lottery money and sending it back to the localities so that we can earmark that for education and improve K through 12 education. That money was put into place as a lottery with the promise to the people that it was going to be for education. That promise was broken. I think now we're about to keep that promise. So that's good. Food tax elimination. We put on the table the elimination of the food tax. We have put on a plan that is very responsible, that will not drive us to break promises that we've made on car tax relief and other promises we've made in return for a new tax cut. That's very different from last year. This year is a much more sounder approach, and I hope that they'll keep that promise as well. So I think that the agenda is coming along very well. There is improvement that needs to be made. I can't tell you that it's exactly the way I want it yet, but it's not over yet.
I don't think any governor has ever gotten exactly what they wanted out of the Assembly. There's a lot of people down there doing a lot with the legislation. kind of hard to predict what will happen. On the food tax proposal, some wish it could go into effect July 1st, some say January 1st, and you had called for, I think, next year. When should it go into effect?
Well, our plan, which was carefully crafted, was designed to go into effect on July 1st of the year 2000. Get it out 1 year and give us a chance to have some growth in our economy to pay for this and to make sure it could be done in a fiscally responsible way. Now, as I said in the State of the Commonwealth address, if the legislature could find a way to bring it in, phase it in a little earlier, that was okay with me, as long as they would do it in a fiscally responsible way. If you back it up too far, then I think you do begin to impinge upon the ability to deliver on other promises. For example, our military tax cut for our military families, our 20% tuition rollback that I've put forward for higher education, so that mothers and fathers can send their kids to school. The 599 money, which is law enforcement money that goes back to the localities. These are all good programs, and if you begin to skew one of these too much and try to phase it in too early, you may threaten mental health, for example, or some of the other forward-looking programs we've put forward.
Over the weekend, the House of Delegates seemed to do a little one-upmanship on you as far as how much to give back to teachers and state employees and people like that. Do you think you can go along with them pushing the envelope a little bit on what you do for folks?
Well, they can push the envelope out a little bit. We were able to reassess the revenues just last week, long after we submitted our budget, and we saw there was going to be at least another $81 million available to the legislature. Instead of trying to earmark that, I gave that information back to the legislature for them to do with as they thought appropriate, trying to be cooperative, of course, with our colleagues in the House and the Senate. So naturally, they can push the envelope somewhat, but if they push it so far that they threaten all of our previous tax cuts, they threaten the productive things that we want to do this year in higher education, K through 12, lottery back for education, and other programs, then I wouldn't want to go along with that. But it's too soon to know whether they're going to do things that would cause those kinds of displacements.
But perhaps you feel better about a little bit more money since that report did come out last week than you did on the State of the Commonwealth tonight?
Well, again, with the State of the Commonwealth address, we had a good, very much, a good amount of money that we were able to put into tax cuts. We were able to propose a food tax cut. We were able to propose a military tax cut, a 20% tuition cut, continuing, of course, the car tax, which I think is a done deal. So we were able to do all those things and still be very forward-looking in my plans for state employees, for example, of trying to even their situation up with other public employees and private employees in the economy, of my aggressive efforts to do something on mental health. These types of forward-looking approaches, good work in economic development, law enforcement, keeping our communities safer. We were able to blend all that. There's yet $80 more million that we can work with, or the legislature can, and let's see what they do with it.
And it still won't be a problem finding out where to spend it. There's enough people out there knocking on the doors asking for it.
Well, you know, Randy, we have to be very concerned about this. It is true that we're in an election. We are in an election year, and there is very little restraint on spending. With a budget that I presented, to be sure, we had additional revenues because of our forward-looking, our pro-business and pro-job economy. We do have additional revenues. I had always said all year that I thought that the economy was in good shape and that our revenues were in good shape. But there has to be some restraint and some choices that have to be made. When I put forward my program, I think I developed some good priorities. I still think they're good priorities, and I hope the General Assembly will adopt them.
What will we be able to do for state employees who perhaps want to retire early? There have been different plans, I think, out there, 30, 50, or so on when to retire and how long to be in state service?
Randy, when I came in, I felt that one of the highest goals that I had was to be a good manager of state government as well as a policymaker. So we talked to the public employees. We talked closely to them in big meetings. We took surveys to find out what people thought. And we listened to people who told me over and over again, you know, after 30 years in a career, most people begin their careers in their early 20s. You know, it'd be nice to be able to go ahead and retire without having to wait for an age 55 if we were just short of that. And I have put forward a plan that allows a retirement at 30 years with a reduction of benefits. And I think that's going to pass the legislature. I hope that it does.
And what does that do for the employees? Does this make them be tempted to leave early, or are we going to lose some good people?
I don't think there's any threat here of that. I, of course, have expressed concern, but after going back and looking at that, I don't believe there's any threat of that. If a person wants to retire at 55, they've given 30 years of service, their entire working adult careers, to the Commonwealth of Virginia, I think it's all right, and we can bring in some people. I don't think we're going to see any kind of brain drain or anything like that. But I do believe that it's good for the morale and the spirit of people who are in the workforce now, who are maybe have 20 years in or 22 years, and they can have something to look forward to. I think they'll be even more efficient now, and frankly, this is what the state employees told me. It isn't what I'm just dreaming up. It's trying to be responsive to the state employees who are doing such a good job for us. And let me just hasten to add, you know, we're minding the store and we're minding the till at all times with respect to this and every other issue. But I think that the state employees do a good job. They work hard for the people of Virginia, and I have the people in mind on this. Mm-hmm. These folks work for the people, and I want to get the best morale, the best efficiency out of the workforce for the people of Virginia, and I think this is a step forward in that way.
And your surveys you've had returned have shown that the state employees pretty much are happy with what they're doing.
I think the state employees are happy, and we want to express great appreciation to them for the work that they do. They come to work every morning. They work hard. You know, I don't want them to be advantaged over other people in the workforce in the private sector, but I don't want them to be behind either. I want them to be competitive, because then we're getting in good people all the time who otherwise might go with a private company. And I want the people of Virginia to have the very best.
One of the most emotional cases that's been going through the committees down here is dealing with the Hugh Finn case and Michelle Finn. And the Assembly seems to want to give her $48,000, maybe $10,000 to other family members. If that does get out of the Assembly, have you decided whether you would veto that suggestion or not?
No, I haven't. Certainly what I did was in good faith in terms of trying to get all the facts out before the court. The family members, of course, urged me to go into the case, and so that their point of view could be more fully heard. In the end, the case may have gone against us, and the General Assembly may have a certain opinion towards this, but I know I acted out of principle and in good faith. So as a result, I haven't decided yet. Let's see what the bill looks like when it gets over to the governor's office. But
without getting into specifics, as the Assembly goes along, are there certain bills that look like they're going to get passed where you know ahead of time that you're going to veto it, or do you really wait until the session's over, then sit down with everything and decide what stays and what goes?
If we saw a bill that was coming through that was just ghastly, we would know that, and we would be making a decision, and we would be quietly sending word that the people ought not to suffer that kind of bill, and the veto is in the offing. But we haven't seen anything like that yet. But on the other hand, it's perfectly possible to take some of our signature proposals and to pass them in such a bad condition that they would be bad for the public. For example, the lottery. There is one version of the bill that's going through the Assembly now where the Democratic Party is insisting that the money go back entirely for school construction and nothing else. Hallmark of my proposal is flexibility for the localities. If they want to use the money for school construction, that's okay with me. But if they want to use it for more teachers, to reduce class sizes, or to increase teachers' salaries, or to do something to prepare kids for the standards of learning test, or to increase quality in the classroom, I think the localities ought to be free to do that and not be in such an inflexible situation. So we would be very unhappy if it came through with that kind of inflexible approach, just with some sort of political score of some kind. So we're watching issues like that. The food tax were to be accelerated so far that it began to jeopardize the car tax cut or the tuition tax cut or something of that nature, we would be kind of concerned about that, and we want to try to repair that. But it's too soon to know whether at the end of the day it's going to end up being a veto on any of these things. We hope that they'll come through in good shape.
So through your communication with the sponsors and other people dealing with legislation, they should know by the time the session ends whether what they have pushed through is a candidate for a veto or not, if you have done what you said and let them know how you feel about that.
We keep people informed all the time, but you know, we have to look at how all the bills come through in order to make a good decision. The veto is not something that we have to telegraph early. It is something that at the end of the day we can look at and say, is this something that affects something else that requires us to stop it at this point? And we're entitled to do that, but we try to communicate and work with the sponsors and the members of the legislature.
So the goal would be, I guess, to not have to veto anything, that your message has gotten through to the Assembly so that everything that they passed is something that you feel comfortable with.
If they'll follow the proposals I've put forward, which I think are the best for the people and balances the budget in the right way, utilizing the extra money that they got because of the reassessment of the revenue, why should there be a veto?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there are some bills that are going to be harmful to the people, and we don't want that to happen. The veto is there precisely for me to consider it in a mature way at the end. It's too soon to know anything about that, though, Randy.
Yeah.
But we still have an opportunity to amend bills, and we're not even to the point yet where the second house has even considered any of the bills. So we have plenty of time to worry about those things.
I believe on Monday you issued a statement saying Virginia is going to join other states in inspecting trash loads that come into the state.
We have announced that.
Yes. What is that all about, and how is that going to perhaps divert some of the legislation that's needed to accomplish the importation of trash?
We don't think that our inspection process diverts any legislation.
Okay.
We have put forward a forward-looking proposal which underscores Virginia's position as a forward-looking leader of America. We are not the trash depository of New York City or any other place, anywhere else in the Union. And I don't believe any state would want to have that reputation. I don't think that Maine would feel that way. I don't think California would feel that way. I don't believe anybody would. We're putting forward a forward-looking, mature process to prevent Virginia from becoming a garbage repository. Concern has been raised about trucks. I think we have a right to check those trucks, do an inspection, and find out what the condition is of them and whether or not the public is safe. And we're joined by, I believe, 4 or 5 other states that are going to do the same thing.
There's been a focus on the trash legislation on the garbage barges moving up and down the waterways. Is that going to have an impact one way or the other, you think, on the future of Virginians' health?
We're concerned because barging in garbage is the most convenient way to load massive amounts of garbage in far-flung places and then float it into Virginia waters and then ultimately into Virginia landfills. That's not the best approach, it seems to me. That discourages states from taking care of their own problems and instead enhances the prospects of some states becoming dumps. That's what our concern is, and that's why we're proposing to eliminate barge traffic in these heavy, massive amounts of garbage from far-flung places.
So in the mix, there's a lot of bills out there that would attack this problem. You feel confident that in the end, we will do what we need to do to keep control of the problem?
I think so. Every indication we have is that our environmental legislation is moving along well. As you know, Randy, I've put forward some wonderful proposals to clean the water, to clean the air, particularly concerned about clean water and making sure that we put money in to not only clean the water, but also to deal with some serious treatment plants in some places that would otherwise endanger the water. So we're working hard on this, but I'm confident that the garbage portion of this is going to see the light of day in the General Assembly.
Some folks have been in here from the Northern Virginia area concerned that you did not propose enough in your State of the Commonwealth address to deal with transportation problems in that area. And I understand there's some suggestions about bonds being sold and some other plans that may help out the folks in Northern Virginia. Are you concerned about that?
I'm always concerned about transportation issues. I'm in every part of the Commonwealth. Driving very frequently. If there's traffic tie-ups, I'm going to be in some percentage of those as well. So I'm very concerned about traffic tie-ups and the inconvenience of people. We do have an aggressive, forward-looking approach. We have more projects underway in Virginia right now than ever before. Because of vigorous efforts with other governors and Senator Warner, we have got back massive new amounts of money which are going into new projects all the time. And we're looking at all of that. I think the only concern I would have with what you were talking about is a bond proposal which offers to put Virginia into debt on transportation. And, we've got a lot of money. We just were talking about that. A whole very much amount of money that's here in a surplus. Traditionally, we don't put general operating revenues into transportation. We rely upon a transportation trust fund to fund these projects. I have, as you know, injected massive amounts of new money into that through the congressional work that we did. So that's the situation we have. The question now is, do we want to go into debt in this off year? Next year is the big budget. We certainly can consider a lot of bond issues at that time. I'm concerned about this, but I have not made a decision as to whether this is the right or the wrong thing for transportation policy in the state. I'd like to see the bill, and I'd like to continue to discuss it with the senators and the delegates.
The House of Delegates seems to think it's the right thing to do to have informed consent for women who are considering an abortion in a 24-hour waiting period. There's some doubt as to whether it can get through the same Senate committee that killed the bill last year. What are your concerns on that issue?
Well, of course, in the State of the Commonwealth address, I indicated support for those proposals, and I hope they'll pass the General Assembly.
You have any predictions one way or the other as to whether it will get to your desk?
Those bills have passed the House of Delegates, I believe, and will go on to the Senate now. And if they come to me, I'll sign them as I said that I would. Let's see what the Senate does.
You will have an opportunity next year to have your first, I believe, fully proposed budget that will have your signature on it. And not too shortly after that, you'll be required by the Constitution to leave office.
Oh, my.
Are you, and looking down the road, are you one of those who is in favor of changing the structure that we have for governors and requiring an intervening term between four-year terms?
Randy, I've thought about this for several years, and I have seen the argument on both sides. I've made the argument, I think, on both sides, but I understand the concerns of both sides of this issue. I think I'm coming down with the idea that we ought to have a second term, not for me, because you can't amend the Constitution or change the laws fast enough to make a difference for me. But for future governors, I can just tell you that other governors, they build long-standing relationships of trust and familiarity. They make deals on behalf of each other's states. And Virginia governors have to come in and move very fast to do that. We have made tremendous progress on these matters. But, you know, I think we're at a little bit of a disadvantage with the other 49 states who allow their governors to succeed themselves. You know, I don't know what the anxiety is. If a governor is not a good governor, they'll vote them out. And they won't give them the second term. That's what the democracy is. Let's take the first term back to the people and let them do an assessment and make a decision as to whether a second term is appropriate or not. And meanwhile, Virginians would not be disadvantaged relative to other states. I don't think it's going to pass in this assembly. I wish the people would speak to the legislators about it, but, you know, it won't matter to me one way or the other. It's not going to affect me.
Should there be any changes in the terms that legislators serve? There's been some talk about capping that at 12 years or so.
No, I don't think so. I'm certainly not at this point prepared to endorse term limits for these delegates or for these senators. I certainly would not want to see their terms extended, you understand. But as far as capping the number of terms that they can serve, I'll think about that for the future. It's never really been addressed to me before, but I wouldn't endorse it today.
It never fails. Every session there's a few issues that the media misses that are bubbling out there and really would have a major impact on Virginians. Is there anything that you're watching between now and the end of the session that you really hope will come to fruition instead of some of these bills that always grab headlines?
Oh, sure, but it's the core issues that I'm concerned with. These are issues that matter to the people of Virginia, that matter to their day in and day out lives. They're concerned about K through 12 education, and so am I. I want our public schools to be the very best schools in the world. And, you know, frankly, the standards of learning tests show that we've got a long way to go. Quality has to be the key in education. And to the extent that money is put back into the system, it ought to be used for quality in education, reduce class sizes, things that are going to make the kids pass the SOLs a little bit better and a little more focused. And the lottery is the key to that. And it needs to go back with the flexibility so that localities can do what they have to do. The food tax cut should be done, but it has to be done in a fiscally responsible way, Randy. Otherwise, you're breaking other promises. The car tax, the 20% rollback in tuition, the military cut, the $5.99 law enforcement money for the safety of our children and our communities. You break all those promises if you get reckless with trying to phase in the food tax in a way that injures everything else. So these are the core things that we're concerned about. I'd like to see a 20% rollback in tuition so mothers and fathers don't have to go deeply into debt to send their kids to higher education in this state. And I think that we ought to increase state support for the colleges and universities to make up for that. And I've proposed $70 million to do that in this budget. These are the key issues that matter to me because I think they matter to the people of Virginia and to the young people and to the future of the state.
And you're hearing from the people in Virginia as well as the state employees.
Well, we do. We certainly know this. They're very happy that they got their car tax cut. They're happy about that because that was a very unfair tax. It is being phased out. We're now going to move into the second year of the phase out. It will now appear as a deduction on their annual ticket. that they get with respect to that bill. But we need to move beyond that now. We need to return more money to the people of Virginia so they can do more with their money for the best interest of their families. Meanwhile, we have some important initiatives that we need to move ahead on, like repairing our mental health system and doing good work, I think, for the people of Virginia in a variety of ways.
Well, there's a lot of issues out there, Governor, as usual. We've got a lot more to talk about, but no more time. I want to thank you for taking your time out to talk with us today, and hope you can come back again maybe later in the session and talk about how things have gone.
Thank you, Randy.
All right, and thank you for joining us on Capitol Events this evening. I'm Randy Davis. We'll see you next time.
Should go back on the flood wall. In other news, the